Well, let's just get me started with the fact that I haven't spoken to you in a few months and a lot of things have changed. First of all, for Huawei's business and interests here in the U.S., how does the Biden administration compare to the previous Trump administration?
Well, it's very early to say. Frankly, the Biden administration is getting up to speed. They had recent confirmations, appointments go into effect. A number of other positions are going to have to be filled in various departments. We have seen some encouraging things in terms of how the United States approaches the world. The emphasis looks like it's going to be much more on multilateralism rather than sort of a U.S. go it alone. I think it's likely that the U.S. Will treat its allies with more obvious respect. And we're hoping that rather than lump a whole lot of different issues together for geopolitical bargaining with China, that the issues will be disaggregated and focused on one by one as to what's in the best interest of the United States. And we hope that if any issues relate to us, we hope that the U.S. government will talk with us and not talk to the Chinese government, because Huawei speaks for Huawei.
One of those issues just coming up today, the U.S. Commerce Department issuing subpoenas for multiple Chinese communications providers. Does that include you?
Well, I checked with counsel a few minutes ago, and we do not have any information that any subpoenas were issued to us. But, we can't be positive yet.
I guess the key question still lies on the fact that Huawei needs to really alleviate those security concerns, right? What are you doing right now?
Well, we're doing a lot, and globally a lot is happening. And frankly, our focus really isn't on our ability to do business in the United States. We recognize that the Biden administration has gigantic issues with the COVID virus, with the economy, and geopolitical issues with China and others. So we are working around the world to help address some of the very significant issues we're seeing in the United States and elsewhere. These recent attacks that on SolarWinds, the Microsoft Exchange servers, two of the biggest cyber attacks ever. And so it's quite clear that the issues about supply chain risk, which were ostensibly directed to us and some others, are very important to the U.S. And hopefully the Biden administration, working with our allies, and hopefully with the private sector, is going to try to come up with objective and transparent basis for knowing which products and services are worthy of trust. Because in those two gigantic cyber attacks, it was trusted suppliers who were violated. And so hopefully the bar is going to be raised. But for us, the priority is hopefully the release of Meng Wanzhou, our chief financial officer, but also the ability of American companies to sell to Huawei. We believe if the U.S. government looks at it in terms of what's in the best interest of the United States, that they may conclude that it's okay to sell this non-sensitive technology to Huawei, and that when you look at the $12 billion a year that we were spending, 40,000 direct American jobs are on the line. And if we're forced to go away forever, those American jobs are going to be gone. And I'd hate to see that.
Andy, you say that you're doing a lot to sort of counter and try to alleviate these concerns that Huawei poses a risk to national security. Can you detail what are some of the things that you actually are doing and how they're being received by governments?
Well, we're really working internationally. There's some tremendous developments in Germany, in particular, the European Union, trying to come up with objective standards, conformance programs, requirements for telecom operators, requirements for telecom equipment suppliers. And so those processes, I think, could help inform what the U.S. government might consider, because the U.S. government has concerns about national security. And a number of different groups are saying, look, the U.S. needs to look at what is really fundamental to national security. Let's look at economic issues, which ones are fundamental to national security. So we're just hoping that at some point, perhaps informed by what's happening in Germany and the European Union and lessons learned from these recent cyber attacks, we're hoping that at some point the U.S. government will talk with the American companies and hopefully decide that to allow the sale of some of these non-sensitive technologies to Huawei and save the American jobs. We recognize that the ability of Huawei to do business in the United States is something that would be years in the future and not really something that has to be worried about right now. But hopefully America is going to make itself safer in the meantime.
What would be a good outcome for you and for Huawei Technologies going into these Alaska talks between the Biden administration officials and Beijing for the first time?
Well, as I said, we are hoping that the U.S. and China can make some progress on some of the geopolitical issues, some of the longstanding issues that have existed, bipartisan issues between the U.S. and China that don't relate to Huawei. We hope that there will be discussions between the U.S. government and us directly about issues around cybersecurity risk, national security risk. People forget that the U.S. has a long tradition of being skeptical about foreign influence, not just from China. And that's why Nokia and Ericsson, two of our major competitors around the world, they're forced to go through certain risk mitigation measures in the U.S. overseen by a committee of government experts. So even they have to be evaluated. And so there are some lessons to be learned there with these new cyber attacks. So we're hoping that we might have an opportunity at some point to talk about what's necessary and what's possible to address real cybersecurity risks, and hopefully also to raise the bar on privacy protection, because the United States has a long way to go in that regard.
Andy, every time we talk to you, you mention American jobs. Has that changed the number of jobs of Huawei employees in the U.S. since all of these sanctions have been put in place?
Yes, we've had to lay off quite a number. I believe in our R&D arm, we laid off about 500 employees, and there have been additional employees let go in our Huawei telecommunications and our Huawei device business. So it's had an impact, and frankly, we're much more concerned in terms of the long term of Huawei globally, and those actions impact on the American jobs. Huawei is hurting, as you know. We just announced we had a profit and revenue growth in 2020. But the fact is, this is going to be a very, very difficult year. We're going to get through it. We're going to be hurting for a while, but we're going to come out on the other end with a whole lot of the new technologies and innovation that we've been involved with.
Exactly. How much will charging fees for 5G patents help?
Well, this is part of the larger issue in the telecommunication industry, where you have essential standards-based essential patents. So we're one of the leaders in those, somewhere between 18 to 20% of the essential patents. And there are these agreements called the FRAND agreements. It's fair, responsible, and non-discriminatory. So we'll only make, we're projecting between 2019 and 2021, about $1.2 to $1.3 billion from licensing our technology. We spend hundreds of millions of dollars licensing other people's technologies. We've got 100 agreements, so it's licensing, cross-licensing. So our ability to make some money, and we're talking about a limit of up to a maximum of $2.50 per mobile devices, is not going to really affect us in terms of revenue. But as we look at a company and what we've invested since 2009 in 5G R&D, and what we're investing each year now with 10,000 employees in R&D, about $20 billion a year, we're now third in the world, we have to make some kind of a return on that investment and come up with pricing and royalty fees that are fair to the industry. And we believe these are very fair.